Celtic Badass of the Week showcases a different badass person of Celtic heritage each week. Those who exemplify the give no shit attitude and come out on top. They may come from our past or our present, but rest assured they come from all walks of life and legend. They are men, women, even old ladies and pirate queens. You don't have to be a muscled-up Celt in a fur kilt swinging a mighty sword. You can just be a 4'11" Welsh woman and suffragette who knows jujitsu. Most of these badasses are all too real. While some may be only legend, badass legends though. The only prerequisite for this title is Celtic blood and badassedness. This week's Celtic badass is Grace OMalley. Now, Grace OMalley was a tough-ass 16th century Irish warrior chick. She led a horde of broadsword-swinging Vikings, Celts, and Scottish Highlanders in naval operations that would dominate the coast of Ireland for a couple of decades. She's known to her contemporaries as the Pirate Queen of Connaught. Now, this estrogenocidal ginger gunslinger raided shipping vessels, battled English armies, conquered castles from rival Irish clans, and once traveled to London just so she could talk shit to Queen Elizabeth in person. This girl, she pretty much rocks. The future pirate queen's life began innocently enough. She was born in Ireland in 1530, a time when the crazy hornbag King Henry VIII was beheading half the female population of England, and nobody really gave a crap what the Irish were doing as long as they didn't screw with the English and Ulster too much. Now, her actual name is Grania Naval, but nowadays we anglicize it to Grace OMalley because, well, it's easier to say. Now, Grace came from a wealthy seafaring family that lived on the western coast of Ireland. Her dad, the leader of Clan OMalley, made most of his money sailing around trading stuff to Spain, England, France, and Portugal, and also collecting a fee from fishermen who used his waters. Now, as a girl, Grace didn't just, sit around the house boiling potatoes all day with her boring mom, so it wasn't long before she was begging her father to take her out to sea on his trading expeditions. Dad understandably wasn't all that pumped up about taking his teenage daughter out into pirate-infested waters, so he made up some BS story and told Gracie that she couldn't because of her hair was too long and it would just get stuck in the rigging on the ship or whatever. Now, Grace, as you will soon learn, wasn't the sort of chick who flinched when it came to make a decision between wussing out and doing badass stuff. However, the next day, Dad went out to the docks and saw that his daughter had cut off all her hair with a knife and was ready to rock out on the high seas. He couldn't exactly say no, so away they went. Now, Grace quickly proved herself not only as an able seawoman, capable of pulling her own weight aboard a merchant vessel, but her ability to work the ship, lead the men, and spot storms on the horizon before anyone else quickly led her to being promoted to serve as her father's second in command, even above some of her older brothers. Now, on some of their trading expeditions, known to the crew as Grace the Bald because of her short hair, one story claims that when her ship was overtaken and boarded by pirates, she personally saved the lives of one of her crew members by leaping off the rigging in the middle of a melee and dive bombing a pirate death style from above. Now, once her sea legs were firmly established, and she made quite a life for herself kicking ass around the high seas for fun and profit, and of course, badassery. The 16-year-old Grace was married off in 1546 to a guy named Donald of the Battle. Donald was a tough, easily irritable Irish hothead who lived in a place awesomely called the Cock's Castle, and spent the most of his time being a jerk to people from neighboring clans. Now, Donald was eventually killed in battle after he pissed off Clan Joyce for some reason. They charged Cock Castle and captured it. Grace immediately raised an army, personally stormed the walls at the head of an army, and retook her dead husband's castle by force. The Joyces renamed it the Hen's Castle, the name by which it still is known today. Later, she married a guy named Iron Richard Burke, who had a real affinity for chainmail foundries and accomplishing nothing of any real importance. Iron Dick was just fine. wouldn't it have been fun if Iron Dick and her went and lived in Cox Castle? That would have just been, I don't know, weird, I guess. But anyway, she basically married him for political reasons, and after a year of betrothal, she locked him out of his own castle and threw all his stuff on the lawn. When Dick came home and was like, "What the hell?" she leaned out the window and yelled, "Richard, I dismiss you." So he left without an argument, and she spent the rest of her life cougaring up with guys she found shipwrecked on shore. I don't know, Blue Lagoon style, I guess. But marriage isn't what defined the Pirate Queen, now. Upon the deaths of her father and husband, Grace OMalley inherited big swaths of coastal land and castles. Using her own ingenuity, ruthlessness, and badassery, she turned that territory into a criminal empire of pirate girl awesomeness that would make the shipping and fishing industries its bitch for the remainder of OMalley's long, ultra-grizzled life. Now, the pirate kingdom of Grace OMalley started off innocuously enough, I suppose. Grace's father had implemented a tax on fishing and merchant ships that moved through his waters, a nominal fee akin to how many nobles put tolls on roads through their land. Well, Grace took this operation over and immediately cranked that organized racketeering shit up to 12. Building a small navy of scurvy Irishmen and sending out her fleet to collect taxes and tolls from an ever-increasingly area of western coast. If people refused to pay the toll, or Grace's henchmen would board the ship pirate style, kick the crap out of everybody on board, take whatever the hell they wanted, and bring the loot back to Sea Queen. Now, eventually Grace stopped even calling it a tax, and the toll collecting business became full-scale piracy. Grace began to augment her already awesome pirate force by recruiting warriors known as Gallowglasses, an elite, tough-as-nails group of claymore-swinging, face-crushing Scots who obliterated everyone in their path in an explosion of blood spray and flying, dismembering appendages. Gallowglasses, in a nutshell, are the result of what happened when the Vikings landed in Scotland, set up villages, and intermarried with the Scottish Highlanders. So they're like Viking Highlanders, kind of. I can think of little that is more terrifying, with these guys at the vanguard of her forces. Now, Grace not only hit shipping and fishing traffic, but soon started pummeling coastal fortresses, capturing large swaths of territory from any clans unfortunate enough to be positioned in her zone of authority. She also built up merchant trade with England, Ulster, Spain, France, and Portugal, accumulating huge quantities of cash from these wealthy countries. But that's marginally less interesting than the Scotch-Irish Vikings storming fortresses with cannons and battle axes. While ruling an empire of Viking Highlander pirates is sweet and all, OMalley was a tough lady herself as well, more than happy to wade into combat herself, and this was definitely not the sort of chick you wanted to cross swords with on a smoke-swept deck of a burning merchantman. One story claims that she gave birth to her third child on the high seas during a trade expedition to the Mediterranean. As she was popping the kid out, word came that the vessel was under attack by Turkish pirates. So she finished giving birth, grabbed her gun, then immediately ran out to bust caps and pirates and command the defense of her ship. Another time, one of her boyfriends was captured and executed by a rival clan. So she waited until the leaders of the clan landed on an island for vacation, attacked the island, burned their ships, and killed everyone she could find. After wiping out the leadership of the clan, she then led her soldiers to assault the clan's fortress, capturing it and reappropriating it for her own use. On yet another occasion, a local English earl refused to let Grace in when she stopped by for a dinner. So she kidnapped the earl's son and held him for ransom, only returning him when the earl decided he'd cook her some bacon and leave an extra place setting out for the rest of his life, just in case she ever decided to show up again. Now, interesting fact, to this day, at that earl's table, tradition is they always set an extra plate, and that remains to this day. Now, as a pretty bitchin' side note, when the Spanish Armada came to attack England in 1588, one of the warships of the Armada got lost in the storm and ended up getting stuck in waters controlled by the Sea Queen of Connaught. Grace O'Malley personally led the attack that captured the war galleon. She was 50 years old at the time. Eventually, the English decided they'd heard enough stories of their people getting their asses kicked by the Sea Queen, so they sent an expedition to attack Hen's Castle and put O'Malley in her place once and for all. Now, Grace held off the attack by pouring hot oil from the roof of the castle onto the attackers, and then by melting down captured armor and plundering and molding it into bullets to fight the English. Having been thoroughly wrecked medieval style, the English force retreated back to their ships and hauled ass back to London. They didn't make it, of course. The moment the attack was called off, Grace lit a signal fire on the roof of her castle, and as the English pulled away, they came face to face with, the Sea Queen's fleet of pirate ships. The English would have their revenge, however. In 1593, the man who had sent the attacking force, the English governor of Connaught, led a raid that captured Grace's brother and sons. He held them for ransom in his prison. Demanding that Grace surrender herself, Grace responded by traveling to London and requesting an audience with another tough-ass British woman, a ruler who had an affinity for high-sea pirating, Queen Elizabeth of England herself. Despite being a badass pirate queen, talking to an actual queen, Grace refused to bow, stood tall, and demanded the release of her family. Elizabeth, who was a reasonable enough woman when it came to shit like this, agreed to fire the jackass governor, recall him to England, and release the prisoners back to O'Malley. As long as she'd stop, destabilizing the countryside and supporting rebellions of petty Irish nobles. That was cool at Grace, and the deal was done. That's one way to get rid of your enemies. So, Grace O'Malley, the badass sea queen and leader of Connaught, dominated the shipping lanes and accumulated tons of wealth during her lifetime. She was never conquered, never defeated, and died an old woman living in a giant freaking castle on top of piles of gold coins and 25-year-old studs with rock-hard abs. Now, her son went on to be Viscount of Mayo, and nowadays she's memorialized in plenty of Irish folk songs as the badass woman she was. She's also notable because Joyce wrote about her in Finnegan's Wake, even though she was a badass.